Hi, welcome. We're so excited, Tisha, to have you here today speaking with me. I'm Hannah Yore, the Director of International Programs at SAGE, and we're really grateful for you to be here with us, share your time, and share a little bit more about yourself and your story. So could you start by introducing yourself, how you identify, and how old you are?
Okay. Hi, Hannah. I'm Tisha Ilaya. I'm 58 years old and I'm lesbian. And I'm based in Cebu City here in the Philippines.
Wonderful. Could you share a little bit more about your background and your life?
Sure. I'll tell you my story as brief as I could. I was 16 years old, eldest of five children to devout Catholic parents when I had my first lesbian relationship, despite harsh objections from my family. With my fifth partner, when I was in my mid-20s, I fell victim to an abusive relationship. I lived through the abuse for 3 years and only escaped my abuser when I saw a way out through a marriage proposal from the man who intervened and scared my then partner into leaving the country. I was 25 and thought that perhaps giving me a husband was God's way of telling me it was time to go back to mainstream, since nothing good was coming out of my lesbian relationships. My mother hated me for giving shame to the family name, all the gossiping from the neighbors, all the missed opportunities at work because I was not the typical demure, submissive female worker, blah, blah. And there was always the fear that I was walking on earth brazenly as a sinner because God hates lesbians, because the church said so. So I married my rescuer, gave birth to our first daughter a year later. However, I wasn't happy to be living a lie. I was still strongly attracted to butch lesbians. And my ex-husband knew it, sensed it. I knew then that I was going to leave him. But first, I made the decision to get pregnant again. Thus was blessed with another baby girl after 4 years of trying. As an aside, I had to have another child because I did not want my older daughter to think growing up that she was a mistake, since I knew deep in my heart that I was going to leave her father, that she was going to grow up without one. So I chose boldly to live as a lesbian parent, regardless of what the future held. However, buried through all the demands of marriage and motherhood was my unhealed trauma for my last lesbian relationship, which left me scarred for life, or so I thought. Then I was invited to speak at a national conference of psychologists on the topic of violence against women and children in the mid 2000s. But I mustered the courage to twist it a little and focus on violence against women in same-sex relationships, as a lot of people back then were unaware that under the VAUSI law that my country passed in 2004, the perpetrator of abuse could also be female, meaning those in lesbian relationships, both the butch and the femme. Whoever was the abuser can be legally prosecuted. This was at a time when uttering the word lesbian was not common and, in fact, was discouraged and not encouraged at all, especially during feminist centered gatherings and discussions. No one was really visibly comfortable saying lesbian during those years, except me. I felt I had to own it. I had to embrace it because it was my identity. I was tired of being branded as just the tomboy's girlfriend. That it was just a phase. That eventually I would still end up with a man because I was not lesbian in the public's eyes. From that day at the conference, I knew for sure that talking about violence against women in lesbian relationships was something I wanted to continue doing until people get it, until the stereotyping ceased, and until I can successfully weave into regular discussions and talks and conversations about women empowerment and women's rights, the acknowledgement that lesbians are women and that our issues and concerns as LBQs, intertwine with those who do not identify with us as women. And I want to continue to talk about this in a language that can be easily understood to people charged with making decisions in government, in law enforcement, in education, and in marginalized communities. Honestly, to just about anyone whose interactions with the public and with the members of the LGBTQIA plus community will have profound effects on how one gets to live in this world. That's my answer. Sorry.
Thank you, Tisha. That was amazing, and really appreciate you sharing so much about your history and your journey. I'd love to hear if you're open to sharing what makes you proud to be an older lesbian.
Sure. Okay. I am proud of the kind of life I led. It was not easy, having to navigate my way around a world that treats my lesbianism with token acceptance, and at the same time creating a life where I enjoyed the protection that education, street smarts, and defiance provided me. As an elder LBQ, I have a chest full of stories to share, both inspiring and thought-provoking, that I hope will propel others on both sides of the fence to change whatever needs changing in the way they view, the way they treat, and the way they think of people in my rainbow community. Being an elder activist also gives me the credibility and the integrity that I need. So people who matter would sit up, listen, and take seriously LGBTQIA issues and concerns that under normal circumstances would be easy to sweep under the rug to give way to other more pressing matters like poverty alleviation, peace and order, public health, and the like. That's what makes me proud as an elder activist.
Thank you. And what does it mean to live authentically to you?
To live authentically for me means to live a life that my daughters will be proud to talk about in the future. When they think of me, their lesbian mom who raised them on my own. It means genuine peace of mind as a lesbian. Something that I stubbornly pursued for so many years, despite all the pain and hurt that I was incessantly subjected to by my mother and my siblings. It still continues to this day, albeit now with some degree of caution on their part, because I have finally learned to cut them off from my day-to-day existence. Living authentically for me means making the conscious but often painful decision to let go of toxic people, friends, and family from my orbit, so I can show to others in my rainbow community that yes, it can be done.
So how has SAGE, through the LGBTI Elders Advancing Initiative, impacted your life?
This project in so many ways has impacted my life. For one, I didn't realize that, I'm now a 58-year-old lesbian mom. 2 more years and my government has to give me discounts for my food and my essentials. On the other hand, my overall experience in this project was both very humbling and disturbingly frustrating. For one, I got to do my share of work together with equally empowered and dedicated lifelong activists to do something meaningful for the elderly members of my rainbow community. This was something I did not think I would end up doing in my advocacy work. But while doing this project, I was also exposed once again to the fact that there is still so much work that needs to be done, especially since there is no other group, to my knowledge, that is focused on attending to the needs of this seemingly neglected age group. Then, as a self-funded activist for 2 decades now, I have always hated how the lack of resources and funding decides a program's or a project's fate. No matter how timely, no matter how necessary, no matter how such is a lifesaver, I always find it difficult to wrap my head around the dependence on having funds in order to go on. I wish I had saved up more when I was younger, so I can continue doing my advocacy work without having to be attached to an NGO since, and this is an entirely different, story. I have this love-hate relationship with the concept of NGOs. However, times are tougher these days, and age is obviously catching up to me.
That makes a lot of sense. And what do you think that younger generations can learn from you and from your generation?
With the internet, social media, and the ease by which misinformation, disinformation, transphobia, homophobia, all these are easily spread far and wide. Today's times is one tough era for the young members of our rainbow family. But we're here for them, all of them. And I think this is very important for them to know that they are not alone and they will never be alone. So what can we offer them? Well, I keep seeing all these short reels on Facebook and threads about how my people, the Gen X, is the, quote, F around and find out generation. And I kind of agree quite amusingly with why. So I think they, the millennials, the Gen Zs, and now the Gen Alphas, they know what we have done, what we had to go through, had to live with, had to give up, or make do with to make things work and to soldier on. That's what we can share with them.
And why do you think it's important that we share the stories of LGBTIQ older adults like yourself?
In addition to what I said earlier, and what my generation can share to the younger generation, if I have to think of one word, I would think of resilience for both the good and the bad. And that's what I would really want to leave to the young. But it is important to share stories of LGBTQ older adults because they're survivors. And who doesn't love survivor stories? Come on. Older LGBTQI individuals survived a time of religious and moral persecutions, pervasive bigotry, widespread emotional and mental abuse, and years of state or culture-sanctioned hate, among others. There should be stories of pain, trauma, abuse, neglect, crime, and other dark subplots and twists. But theirs will also be stories generously peppered with inspiration, courage, fortitude, kindness, compassion, justice, and love. Everything beautiful and positive in life, we will find them in the stories our older members of the rainbow community can share. And in this world, especially now in these trying and very confusing times, the world needs to hear those rainbow-colored stories. We need to share them.
And lastly, is there anything else you want to add that I haven't already asked you about today? Anything at all?
I think I'll just touch on the question about the means to advocate for our rights as a community, because I was, yeah, is it okay?
Absolutely, please.
Okay. So the question about what it means to advocate for rights in our community, I've always been considered, even in my teen years, as outspoken and sucker for the underdog, pardon my language. Whether it was for the plight of the poor, the exploited, the abused, I usually did not hesitate to speak up and call out anyone or anything that needed to be exposed. I was born in a period when girls weren't supposed to talk back, weren't supposed to explain or justify or defend their actions. So I was always branded a maverick. And I embraced this tag without flaunting it, I celebrated in silence this label. For years now, I always end my lectures and my talks with an animated slide on how we in the LGBTQIA community do not ask for special rights, but equal rights. And I've lived my life claiming and continue to claim these rights in the best ways I can, the best ways I know how. And I will continue to soldier on.
Thank you, Tisha, so much for sharing more about your history and your activism. I know that I'm excited to share this with more folks. So I think we'll end it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Hannah.